You are listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope, the podcast. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today I'm here with Dr. Jordin Wiggins. Dr. Wiggins is a naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and women's sexual health disruptor. She is revolutionizing the way we deliver, educate, and talk about sexual health and pleasure. As the author of the Pink Canary, Dr. Wiggins has unlocked the hidden secret to optimal wellness and the real life ways you can start to welcome pleasure back into your life and relationships. I am super excited to have you here today, Dr. Wiggins. She's actually written for Best Holistic Life, and her article blew up. And so we've asked her back to write again, but thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jana. Any day I get to talk about my work and sexual health for women is a great day.
You know, I'm going to ask you first to share your story of hope, but I cannot wait to talk to you because we're at such a beautiful stage right now of what the world is doing. And when I grew up, you didn't talk about sex. You just found out the way they found out about problems or solutions or whatever's going on. And I love that the age that we're living in now, people are open to talking about everything, and it's beautiful. But first, we're going to ask you to share your story of hope with all of us.
For sure. So we'll start with the dark times that kind of led me here, but I lost my libido twice in my life. Once when I was doing my pre-med degree, I had gone on birth control, experienced depression, weight gain, and low libido, which is, kind of ironic when you go on oral contraceptives for contraception and you don't even want to have sex anymore. And the solution that I was offered by the medical system was, just take an antidepressant, add another pill to the problem. And I started researching because I was doing my pre-med degree. I was in pharmacology, physiology, learning about these things, and there wasn't answers. So I started to feel very broken, like something was wrong with me. I was in my early 20s with a partner that I loved and cared about. We were together for 5 years and I didn't want to have sex. And there were no answers. So it turned out that I had a hormone imbalance, and that actually led me to naturopathic medicine, which taught me a more holistic approach to hormone balance, mood balance, that wasn't just here, take this pill and let's see what it fixes. So got my hormones balanced, went off the pill, libido returned, relationship was better. Then I started to have pelvic pain, and this pain went undiagnosed for probably 3 or 4 years. It would come on suddenly, it would take my breath away. And I even ended up in the ER twice. And I'm a tough person with high pain tolerance, and this was excruciating pain. I was sent to several specialists without answers. And it wasn't until years later, while doing my own research, because of course, who wants to have sex if sex is painful, I found a pelvic floor physiotherapist. And because I was so active, in really good shape, I actually had hypertonic pelvic floor muscles that were turned on and just wouldn't relax and turn off. So again, medical system didn't have answers for me. And I was researching in the shadows on my own. And of course, when you don't desire sex for whatever reason, it creates relationship issues. And when you're not finding answers, it starts to play with your self-esteem because you're going to doctors and they're saying, well, live with it, or, oh, well, this pain must be in your head because we can't see it on an MRI or something. So that's when I thought, because this overall was a 10-year process. Then I opened my women's health clinic and I started to realize, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. 9 out of 10 women that came into my medical clinic reported low libido. And it was a question that I had on my intake form because it was an issue for me. So I got a template from one of my mentors, left it on there. And just because I was asking, it was like I opened the door for women to say, hey, this is me too. I've been struggling for years. I feel broken. I don't know what to do. So then I was like, well, actually, I have a lot of tools and resources and things because I've been over here reading and researching kind of in the shadows to fix myself. But I realized it wasn't just me. And research says that 1 in 2 women globally will suffer from sexual dysfunction, which is massive. 50% is massive. And I think that's underreported personally.
I agree. I think it's totally because people don't want to say, yeah, I'm not wanting sex anymore. Like they think something's wrong with them.
Exactly. There's so much shame around it. And it's like, we're not fulfilling our role as a partner or wife, and we don't want to raise our hand. And I know I hear it all the time. Women will say, I don't care if I ever have sex again, but I do it for my partner, like as an item that I check off my to-do list, just so like I'm going through the motions. But for me, I wouldn't care if I ever had it again. And that is such a shame to me that that's sort of what we've accepted as status quo for women's sexual health.
I feel too, like when we have those moments of, or those phases in our life where we've lost our libido. And by the way, I just keep thinking of a cartoon character running around looking under the sheets and in her closet, in her purse for her libido, right? Where'd it go? It was here.
Yeah. What happened? Where did it go?
Exactly. But I think sometimes our partners, when they don't understand that we're going through that, take it as rejection and that maybe we're not in love with them the same way we were. And that is not the case at all. But I think it hurts our relationships because we're not able to explain that or reach out and get the proper help for it.
Exactly. That the distress that mismatched libidos causes in a relationship is huge. And for several of the women that I work with, we've been able to, their like divorce papers are filed here. Their relationship is on its last legs. And we've kind of been able to, resurrect that part and bring them and their partners back together, which is amazing. But what people need to understand is mismatched libidos are to be expected in a relationship. And if we can normalize that, because as we go through life transitions, I had a baby in the last year with breastfeeding, low estrogen, menopause. There are times in your life where your libido will ebb and flow, for men as well. And if we normalize that and we give couples tools for how to work around that to still stay intimately connected, and we're not doing the finger pointing blame game, well, you must not love me anymore. And if you loved me, you would want to have sex with me. And if you found me attractive, you would just want to. Like, those are all really, really outdated beliefs and concepts from Hollywood and porn and really the miseducation or the complete lack of education we've had around sexual health.
I agree. I think for a lot of women, I know that they read those sex romance novels and life isn't like that. Like, as a matter of fact, some of the books I had read, I'm like, they could go to jail if they did that today's day and age. Like, that isn't legal to just like do that sort of stuff. You have to have permission and you have to have all these other things that are now around the way we perceive sex. So it's just not real. And if you're expecting your partner to be an imaginary movie star or someone they wrote about in a book, or I remember when I read the one series of books with Jamie. I don't even remember the name of the series, but I'm like, wish my husband was like that. He's not going to pop up Scottish, right? Wearing a kilt.
Oh, do you mean Outlander?
Yes.
Oh,
I love that
yeah.
book.
Yeah.
That book series
Outlander
was
is good.
amazing. But yeah, those are all not real.
And well, I talk about this in my book, The Pink Canary. 50 Shades of Grey was very interesting as a not a cultural experiment, or it just that blew up, right? So we have at least 50% of the population lacking desire, difficulty getting aroused, staying aroused, and 50 Shades of Grey blows up. And that really lacked consent.
Yep.
It was a lot more man in dominant role, woman in submissive role, and not really like real life at all. And there are some people that is totally their thing, and I'm all for whatever two consenting people turns them on. I'm all for that. So I'm not like knocking BDSM, but I'm just saying for most people, that was far out of the realm of what was going on in their intimate sexual relationship. And what I think that says, and what I think that communicated, is women are seeking to be like pleasured, ravished, feel like safe, but also excited. And we don't know how to communicate these things or ask for them, because what we've been taught is girls that want sex are insert, number of bad words or derogatory terms. There's so much guilt and shame around it that this was almost like, just permission to surrender and be pleasured, be turned on, be ravished. And we aren't in touch with that side of ourselves because of what we've been told from culture, society, our parents, religion. And not only are we not in touch with it, but we can't or don't know how to communicate it, because so many people that I work with, they're high achieving women, doctors, lawyers, run their own, multi 6-7 figure businesses. They kill it in life. And then in the bedroom, it's like, they tell me it's like I have a gag. It's like it gets stuck in my throat and I can't ask for what I want.
By the way, I'm from that generation. I was raised Catholic, so you can figure out that. And I'm going to just say it because it just keeps popping in my head. But I remember what I was taught about sex in the Catholic religion was any hole but the holy hole, because you were supposed to be a virgin before you got married. By the way, I was not. I had a daughter at 17. Today's her 43rd birthday. So yay for me.
Happy birthday.
But
yeah.
I know we made it, like I made it with her. And here's the thing, like I was not taught that you had a voice, that you were submissive. And by the way, 50 Shades of Grey is what I was referring to when I said you could go to jail. I wouldn't even have got to the sexual stage with the person who was stalking me, manipulating me, and doing all that sort of stuff before we even got into an intimate relationship. So those to me are not realistic. And those are red flags. I mean, if you're dating a man that's got your phone tracked, is manipulating you, telling you stories to get you to do something, that's a huge red flag.
Yes. Real life, big red flag. Book fantasy, turn on, when we're talking about, fantasy as turn on, very different story. But thank you for pointing
internet
out.
The way it is and social media the way it is, people have a hard time deciphering what's real anymore and what's a fantasy. Like I've seen people who have fallen in love with someone, they've never met him in person, maybe never even talked to them on the phone, but they have this long-term relationship in text or maybe phone calls, and they're in love and they're leaving their families for someone who's not even real. And they have a hard time connecting with that because they're searching for something that isn't
doesn't
real.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's super sad. But what I like to see, and this is what I think that you're actually doing, is creating a generational change. If we can raise healthier sons and daughters that are more open, more, accepting of what sexuality is, and saying things like, I still see women, and it's okay, by the way, it's okay, but I still see women telling their boys that they have a wee wee, and I'm like, why can't we use those words? Because then as an adult, they're going in there like, it hurts when I go wee wee with my wee wee, right? And the doctor's like, oh my gosh, this is a grown man. Can you still not say the word penis? But it's crazy that we're still afraid of those words. Like, we're afraid of those words. We're ashamed of those body parts. We're hiding them. We're embarrassed by them when they're not functioning properly. And I think that's sad. And I think what you're doing is creating that beautiful ripple effect and generational change that we're going to raise sexually healthy children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, right?
And that is my true mission. It's funny that you bring that up, because I had an Instagram DM this morning and said, I read your book. I'm reading it a second time, like, loved it. What age do you think is appropriate? Because I want to buy it for my son's girlfriends for Christmas. And that, to me, that is that ripple effect. That's the generational pleasure. Like, if we can learn and then we can pass it on, we can pass on pleasure-focused sex education that includes consent. And how do you communicate these things so that you're not in a situation where you feel uncomfortable with no voice? That, to me, is, I could cry, because that's exactly what I feel like I was put on this earth to help change, is the sex education for generations to come.
I agree. I don't even know if you remember what sex ed was like in school, but for me, it was awful. Like, it was awful. I feel like they should separate us, because then the guys just make fun of your menstrual cycle. Now you're more ashamed of it, right? It was just very awkward.
It's bad. There is, I think, only 12 states that it's mandated to have factually accurate sexual health education. I think it was 13. And then depending on which president, it was one less. And I also went to Catholic school, elementary and high school. And we had a book called Fully Alive, and there was the pictures, and people would point and laugh. And it, obviously, abstinence was promoted, and it was fear-based on, if you have sex, you're going to get an STI, you're going to get pregnant. And we know now, there's research, even progressive countries like New Zealand starts sexual health education in kindergarten, and age-appropriate sexual health education. But we know that if we give children the correct names for their anatomy, which I'm going to just do a little side note here. The correct name for her anatomy is a vulva, not a vagina. Vagina is the internal part, the canal, like that the baby passes through. What you're looking at externally is called a vulva. So I feel like we got to update that one, because we do penis and vagina, but it's really vulva. We don't say testicle when we mean penis. So I think we should accurately teach our children that one. But if we give them the correct names, they have the reproductive education and they have consent education. Statistics for STIs, unwanted pregnancies, rape, and assault are all significantly decreased. And we know that it starts by teaching age-appropriate sex education when children are young.
So I think that's a great thing to start bringing up. So for me, I have 4 children, 3 daughters and a son. And for me, talking about sex was when they started asking. And so I didn't just set them down one day and start talking about sex at any age. When they started asking questions, or I heard them making comments that maybe weren't appropriate, and I knew they didn't know it. Like my son called his best friend's sister a whore. And so I sat down and I said, do you know what that means? No. Well, let me tell you what it means. And I told him, when he was horrified that he used that word, but he had heard the word and not. So then I thought that was an appropriate time. You're using the word. It's time to learn what the word's meaning is. But when is a really good time for you to start having those open conversations with your children?
I think like naming when they can start, like with language development, that is for sure. We need to be teaching people the right names for their body parts as soon as children start to learn to talk. And then generally in different children, like you mentioned, might be interested or more aware at certain times. I mean, I guess the writing was on the wall for me, but I was young asking about where babies came from. I was like 4 or 5 and I would not leave it alone. And my mom said she had to go to our library, because this is years ago, like go to our local library and ask them to special order some sex education book for younger children. Because I think I was like 5 or something, and I just wouldn't take the stork or the belly or the, like, I needed more. And my sister was a few years later learning about those things. So interest is one thing, but we also can prevent some, awkward encounters for our children if these conversations are happening at school and then they're coming to you later. Like they could have benefited from the knowledge ahead of time. So oftentimes we're recommending, and we work with like, scripting and kind of what's age appropriate and stuff in my programs, but we're like opening a door, right? Maybe they're not asking yet, but you can say things like, have you ever wondered where babies come from? And maybe they just don't care. It's not on their radar, but you're opening a door to make it okay that they can come and ask. And sometimes you can kind of spark those conversations as well by letting them know it's okay.
I absolutely love that. I know having, as a parent, having sexual conversations with your kids is very awkward. Having said that, the less awkward you feel because you've been talking about it since they were little, giving them proper names, giving them little bits of information. I think that key too is to always be honest with your kids. And if it's something that maybe is not appropriate for them to know at 3 or 4 or 5, just tell them, in a couple of years, I hope you ask me that again. I would love to have that discussion, but this is just too early. But I think if we start making the stories of the stork brings the babies, or those are cute stories, right? But not in reality. And then you start building this sexual distrust with not only your children, but with them having other relationships, right? So I think that having a real honest dialogue with them and just start getting comfortable. If you start talking to them at a really young age and answering those questions as they ask them, that conversation will go. They're going to feel comfortable coming and asking you.
Exactly. And that I think above all else is the most important.
I know, like, I don't know where your stance is. I know that a lot of the reasons that they're pulling all the sex education out of schools and the proper is because people think that should be learned at home. And the truth of the matter is some parents just aren't equipped to teach that. They're just not. It's not a bad thing. And they don't want to either. It's like very uncomfortable to talk to your children about sex because of the way we were raised. I know the next couple generations are going to crush it because they're being raised in a more open environment where it's okay to talk about stuff. And or say I'm on my cycle. We hid it. Like we did not want anyone to know that it was that time of the month because that was our shameful time, basically, not the beautiful time that we were given. Right. So, and now women are like, yeah, it's my period or amp flows here, whatever the term is that they're using. But we didn't talk about that when I was growing up at all.
I know it's so amazing to me how much shame there was. And even for my generation, I'm a millennial, which I don't really identify with the whole millennial thing, but for another conversation. We had the shame too with our periods. And I think the internet and like the free bleeding movements and things that are happening. There's the femtech companies that are getting funded. It's normalizing something that has been a normal biological function, but it's definitely younger generations are less ashamed because they can consume media about periods and just a normal part of being a human with a uterus and ovaries.
When I grew up, it was so taboo to talk about anything to do with sex that you couldn't see feminine products on TV. They could not sell or promote condoms on TV. And even movies, it was a married couple, had to sleep in separate beds. You could never see them in the same bed, which is like saying sex is taboo and you can't show it. You can't talk about it. It's, just not something that anyone's supposed to know about. And it's definitely changed.
And it's so damaging. And I think that's a big part of the reason why we have the low libido epidemic, especially for women that are 40 plus.
So Dr. Wiggins, I'm going to ask you a question, like, what do women do? Because I will tell you, there's very few doctors, and I'm not bashing doctors. My husband's a doctor. I'm not bashing doctors. I absolutely 100% am grateful to them in my wellness journey. But I also am super grateful that I found holistic medicine and can wove it into that. But I promise you, if you go to your doctor and you tell them you have low libido, they're probably going to run a panel blood work, but they're going to tell you need an antidepressant or change your diet. I mean, I don't even think a doctor would even say that because they just don't connect your nutrition with maybe what's going on in your body quite yet. And having said that, with my husband being a doctor, both my daughters were in med school, but now they're doctors of natural medicine. They said in school, we only learn one semester of nutrition. That's it. And it's basically how it reacts with medication. So we really don't learn about food and the bodies in med school because there's so much to learn in that 8-year period that they don't take a lot of time on that. So it's a lot. But what would you tell women who are like struggling with this, or men? Like, I know that it's a men's issue as well. And they're being given an antidepressant, or maybe they're going online and buying testosterone creams or pills. And those are not like necessarily what you need is to add more testosterone. And women think that their hormones are estrogen and obviously testosterone. What's the other hormone I'm thinking of? But there are millions of hormones in your body that are all interlinked to the way you function. There's so many of them. And it's not just those three. And so what would you tell people who are looking for help? Who would they seek help from so that they could get answers? Maybe they do need an antidepressant, but maybe it's something different.
I will give you a quiz that you can link in the show notes if that's helpful, because 95% of the time it's not hormones. And I have an in-depth chapter in my book, The Pink Canary, that explains this all, because people are coming to me, I think it's my hormones. I think it's my hormones. 9 times out of 10, I do the blood work or any urine testing, whatever, for hormones, and the hormone levels are fine. It's a multifactorial problem that there isn't an easy fix. The antidepressant doesn't fix it, the testosterone, the estrogen. And if you are one of the minority that it really was a hormone imbalance causing it and hormone replacement fixes it, that's amazing. A functional medicine doctor, naturopathic doctor, like we prescribe hormones at my clinic all the time, but it's always, hormones, like I'm sleeping better, the weight's coming off, my brain fog is gone, but it didn't change my libido at all. So we'll give you that quiz because that will be helpful for your listeners. But I really recommend my book, The Pink Canary, or my podcast, the Pleasure Principles podcast, for more info, because it is a multifactorial problem. And I can't just say, schedule an intimacy date with your partner, practice self-pleasure. Like, all of these tips will work, but we need to get to what is going on, which one of the multitude of factors is going on for you as the individual, and treat those.
I love that answer because I'm a mindset coach and I tell people all the time, 80% of everything going on in your life is starting between these two beautiful ears of yours. We have blocks inside of us that we are not even aware of, that we heard back when we were just 4, 5, 6 years old, that we saw as a child, and it became this big monster in our brain, and we can't get past that. But as an adult, when we go back and we look at those things, you're like, but that wasn't that scary. Like I have control over what's going on in my life now, and I can do differently, right? So I think you're right. I think that all of our libido and our ideas of what sex is all around is between our ears, like a huge part of it. Like that other 20% could be hormonal. It could be your depression. It could be lots of other things, but 80% of that is like what we have in our head.
That's so well said, Jana. I do the pleasure mindset boot camp because that is where I'm finding the issue is. It's majority in the brain and our thoughts and what we've learned and beliefs. And once we unpack all of those, big surprise, libido's back, relationship, connection, things are good again. And it starts with mindset, mindset.
I think that's amazing. So I'm going to literally get that quiz link from you. And I'm going to link also for all of you to the Pleasure Principles podcast where you can get more information. But where can they find you, Dr. Wiggins?
They can find me on Instagram at Dr. Jordin Wiggins and my website, thepleasurecollective.com.
I love it. So we're going to have all of that in the show notes, and we're going to be able to connect you with all of those things so that you can get more information and maybe reconnect with your libido. Thank you so much, Dr. Wiggins, for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show. That'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.